Welcome to the deep dive. Look at your hands for a second. Now, since today is Sunday, April 5, 2026, I want you to imagine those hands covered in rich volcanic dirt. You are deep in a Costa Rican rainforest, carefully planting native tree seedlings into a restored riverbank.
Wow, I love that visual.
Right, and you've got howler monkeys echoing through the canopy right above you. Later on, you're going to sit down to a meal prepared by a local family using ingredients they pulled straight from the soil you were just working in.
It sounds like an incredible experience, honestly.
It really does. But the real magic here is the underlying premise. This is a journey where your presence isn't destructive. You are actually leaving the ecosystem stronger than you found it.
Yeah, which represents a profound shift in how we relate to the planet as temporary visitors. And what the data tells us is that this is no longer some fringe niche concept, reserved for a tiny fraction of hardcore environmentalists.
Definitely not anymore.
No, not at all. Our analysis today is built on a massive stack of 2025 and 2026 travel reports, market projections, and newly implemented sustainability guidelines. And the baseline numbers are a huge wake-up call to the industry.
Yeah, the sheer scale of the shift is wild.
It really is.
Yeah.
A landmark 2025 report revealed that 93% of global travelers now actively seek out sustainable choices when planning a trip. In Asia alone, the prioritization of sustainable travel surged to 77% in a single year.
Wow, 93% globally.
Yeah. Consequently, the global sustainable tourism market is currently barreling toward an estimated $11.53 trillion valuation by 2033.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to take that mountain of data and distill it into a practical, entertaining guide for you. We want to show you how you can see the world while actively saving it, without getting duped by marketing jargon.
Which is so easy to do these days.
It is, because the industry throws around terms like sustainable travel and ecotourism interchangeably, and they represent completely different approaches. So is sustainable tourism kind of like maintaining a zero balance on a credit card?
That's a really interesting way to frame it.
Yeah, like you're just trying not to accrue any environmental debt and do no harm. Well, ecotourism is actively putting money into a high-yield nature savings account to actually grow the environment.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly, actually. The distinction dictates exactly how a trip is built from the ground up. Sustainable tourism is the broad, guiding umbrella.
Right.
The United Nations defines it through three necessary pillars: economic, social, and environmental. Economically, the tourism must generate viable income for local residents. Socially, it has to respect and preserve local cultural heritage.
And then environmentally, it minimizes pollution and resource extraction.
Exactly. It is the zero balance approach. Ecotourism, on the other hand, is a highly specific subset. It focuses exclusively on responsible travel to natural areas with a strict mandate to conserve the environment and visibly uplift local communities.
That's much more active.
Very much so. It requires rigorous waste management protocols, caps on visitor numbers in fragile ecosystems, and direct financial contributions to conservation efforts.
So ecotourism isn't, booking a weekend in Paris, staying in a chain hotel, and making sure you put your empty water bottle in the recycling bin. It is fundamentally nature-based and conservation-driven from the moment you arrive.
Exactly. The irony is, if we look back at the origins of these movements in the 1980s, they emerged as a desperate grassroots reaction against the cultural degradation caused by cheap mass-market package holidays.
Which totally took over the industry back then.
Oh, absolutely. By the 2000s, organizations like the UN had formalized the frameworks. But now, in 2026, analysts have declared that we are in the reorientation and regeneration phase.
The reorientation and regeneration phase.
Yes. Driven by a combination of the pandemic's lingering cultural impact and escalating climate crises, the goal is no longer just minimizing harm. The goal is active regeneration.
I find this regenerative shift fascinating because it is completely rewiring the psychology of the traveler. We are tracking a massive migration away from what these reports categorize as checklist tourists.
Oh, the checklist tourists. We all know them.
You know the archetype. The people who disembark from a mega cruise ship, snap a selfie in front of a historic monument, buy a plastic magnet manufactured halfway across the world, and immediately leave.
Yep, the classic hit-and-run approach.
Exactly. They are rapidly being replaced by skill sourcers. These are people who travel to learn traditional crafts from indigenous artisans or participate in scientific conservation training. They want to integrate and contribute their own skills, not just their wallets.
Which fundamentally disrupts the traditional economic flow of a destination. A core objective of the 2026 regenerative movement is solving a structural failure known as Tourism leakage.
Tourism leakage.
Yeah, tourism leakage occurs when the money a traveler spends immediately bleeds out of the local community and funnels into the bank accounts of multinational corporations. You pay a premium to stay at a foreign-owned luxury resort, and that profit leaves the country overnight.
Wow, so the local economy barely sees a dime of that.
Right. Community-based tourism models are designed to aggressively plug that leak. By staying in locally run cooperatives or hiring independent local guides, your capital pays for the town's school supplies, water infrastructure, and local salaries.
The theory is beautiful, but intentions do not fuel airplanes. If we want to know whether this regenerative shift is actually healing the planet or just making us feel better about taking vacations, we have to examine the hard math of global movement.
And the numbers present a pretty complicated reality, honestly. On the positive side, between 2019 and 2024, tourism's global greenhouse gas emissions fell by 9.3%.
Okay, that's a decent drop.
It is. Even more telling is the drop in emissions intensity, meaning the volume of emissions generated per individual traveler, which dropped by 15%. The sector is undeniably generating more economic value while producing fewer emissions per trip.
So the logistical efficiency of modern travel is improving. But if you look at the total volume, a 15% drop in intensity feels like celebrating that your boat is taking on water slightly slower, even though the hole in the hull is still wide open.
That is a very fair point.
Because the tourism sector still accounts for roughly 7.3% to 8% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, the projections show that tourist waste is on track to hit 205 million tons annually by 2034.
205 million tons. It's almost hard to picture.
To visualize that, it's enough solid garbage to fill the Empire State Building to the brim every single week. And we aren't leaving this waste in cities with advanced recycling plants. We're leaving it on remote islands and in fragile mountain ranges that have zero infrastructure to process it.
Yeah, the waste crisis is severe precisely because of that infrastructure gap. And the realization that we cannot simply optimize our way out of this volume problem leads perfectly into the current reckoning over carbon offsets.
Carbon offsets. The classic loophole.
Right. What's fascinating here is how the industry's historical safety net is fracturing under scrutiny. For years, platforms like Atmosphere or major carriers like Air Tahiti Nui offered programs where consumers could calculate their flight's emissions and pay a fee to plant trees.
Or fund renewable energy projects somewhere else.
Exactly. The math seemed logical to the consumer. But climate scientists have forced the industry to admit a fatal flaw in the timeline. A newly planted tree takes 20 years to grow and absorb meaningful amounts of carbon, but the jet fuel you just burned is trapping heat in the upper atmosphere today.
The math simply does not balance.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. You have major industry titans finally acting on that broken math. Take Intrepid Travel, a massive player in the global adventure space.
They are huge.
Yeah, in 2025, they looked at the discrepancy between their offset claims and their actual atmospheric impact, and they made a radical pivot. They completely scrapped their carbon offsetting program.
Wait, they just got rid of it entirely?
Entirely. Instead, they launched a $2 million climate impact fund. They openly admitted that buying carbon credits was a band-aid and that transitioning to renewable energy across the 117 countries they operate in was moving far too slowly. So rather than paying an external company to plant trees, they are injecting that capital directly into their own supply chain. They are physically installing solar panels for their local homestay partners and actively converting their own transport fleets to eliminate the emissions at the source.
That is massive. It establishes a vital new precedent. The emerging consensus is that offsets can only be a supplementary tool. They become a dangerous excuse if they are used as a substitute for direct emissions reduction.
You have to eliminate the carbon output first.
You must. And if a well-resourced, highly intentional company like Intrepid struggles to balance the environmental books, it exposes just how easily the system is manipulated by actors who do not care about the math.
Which brings us to the dark side of the industry. Because as sustainability transforms into a trillion-dollar selling point, the ethical landmines are popping up everywhere. There are companies out there that aren't trying to fix the math. They're just faking it to capture your tourism dollars.
Oh, absolutely. The ethical controversies in the modern landscape are profound. The most visible issue is over-tourism in protected natural areas. In 2025, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, passed Motion 130, with an overwhelming 98% vote.
Motion 130. What did that do?
This was a desperate, coordinated call to legally restrict tourism infrastructure in protected areas. It reinforced that these zones exist primarily for biodiversity conservation, not to host mass commercial development. Then you have the egregious examples of wildlife exploitation masquerading as ecotourism.
Right. The stuff that's just purely for entertainment.
Exactly. A recent investigative study highlighted extremes like orangutan kickboxing staged purely for tourist entertainment. That type of attraction provides zero conservation value, zero educational value, and actively harms the species.
It's horrifying that things like that are still operating. But we are seeing the market push back against exploitation, aren't we? Late last year, in November 2025, Der Tour Group 1 of the largest travel conglomerates in Germany dropped all support for marine parks holding captive whales and dolphins.
Yeah, following the lead of companies like Jet2 Holidays. Relentless pressure from consumer advocacy and animal rights groups is forcing those market shifts. But the ethical landmines extend well into human rights, too.
How so?
Well, recent investigations revealed that specific nature conservancies in Kenya, which were actively marketed for ecotourism and heavily utilized for corporate carbon credit projects, were actually masking severe human rights abuses. This included the forced eviction of indigenous people from their ancestral lands.
That is incredibly dark.
It serves as a stark reminder that environmental sustainability is entirely hollow if it is built on social exploitation.
So, if you are listening to this, how are you supposed to navigate this minefield? You want to do the right thing, you want to ensure your money stays in the local community, but you could accidentally be funding an abusive conservancy.
It's a huge concern for travelers.
Or, even more commonly, you fall victim to greenwashing. Where a massive hotel chain simply pastes a green leaf logo on their booking page, claims they are eco-friendly because they ask you to reuse your towel, and calls it a day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this rampant, unchecked greenwashing is the exact reason governments are finally intervening. The era of trusting a company's self-assessment is over. The shield of certification is becoming codified into law.
Which regulation specifically?
A prime example is the European Union's Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition Directive, or the ECGT. Taking full effect in September 2026, it fundamentally outlaws vague, misleading environmental claims. A company can no longer market a service as climate neutral or eco-friendly without verified third-party proof.
France is taking it a step further with their climate and resilience law, right? By 2026, they are legally mandating that all hotels must display a verified A to E environmental score.
Yes, exactly.
It is essentially like looking at the mandatory health inspection grade in a restaurant window, but applied to the facility's carbon and waste footprint.
For the consumer, this regulatory wave really removes the guesswork. But until those laws are global, you need to rely on the gold standard certifications. The Global Sustainable Tourism Council, or GSTC, is currently the most trusted benchmark worldwide.
How does their system work?
They utilize a unique, transparent certification code system. When you are looking at a hotel, you can take their specific GSTC code, type it into the council's public directory, and instantly verify their third-party audit status.
Oh, that's incredibly useful. What else should people look for?
You also have Green Key, which mandates rigorous environmental responsibility, and EarthCheck. EarthCheck is particularly powerful because it requires facilities to submit actual hard consumption data regarding their water usage, energy draw, and waste output, rather than just promising to do better.
Now that the ECGT directive and real certifications are stripping away the greenwashing, the entire map of global travel is shifting. Destinations that relied on cheap mass market volume are losing ground to places that actually built sustainable infrastructure.
The map is definitely being redrawn.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for your 2026 playbook. Where exactly should you go, and how should you get there?
The 2026 playbook is defined just as much by the transit as the destination. The explosion of flight-free travel is radically reshaping European tourism.
Yeah, I've been seeing that everywhere.
Initiatives like the Swap the Sky campaigns in Amsterdam and Berlin are actively incentivizing travelers to choose rail and ferries over short-haul flights. And the infrastructure is rising to meet the demand. We are tracking a massive surge in luxury sleeper buses connecting major hubs like Zurich, Amsterdam, Brussels, and Barcelona.
Sleeper buses.
Yeah, these modern fleets offer lie-flat beds and generate up to 90% fewer carbon emissions compared to a commercial flight covering the same distance.
And the destinations themselves reflect a desire for a different kind of experience.
What?
The data points to a huge rise in quietcations. Travelers intentionally seeking out destinations that allow them to escape the noise and the crowds.
Oh, quietations are huge right now.
Take Madeira, the Portuguese archipelago. It has actually surpassed traditional heavyweights like Milan and Chicago as 2026's top trending destination. But they aren't achieving this by building massive mega resorts.
Right, they're taking a completely different approach.
They are drawing people in by fiercely protecting their UNESCO-designated Laura Silva forest and maintaining their historic irrigation channels, the lavadas, for low-impact hiking.
Moving beyond Europe, Namibia has become a masterclass in high-value, low-impact tourism. They offer the vast, uncrowded starkness of the Skeleton Coast, but they strictly cap visitor numbers.
So they keep the foot traffic really low.
Exactly. The exclusivity allows them to charge higher entry fees, which are funneled directly into funding localized anti-poaching units for endangered black rhinos. The exclusivity is the conservation mechanism.
That is brilliant.
You also have Dominica, which has firmly cemented its reputation as the nature island of the Caribbean by resisting the massive cruise ship terminals that dominate neighboring islands. And Turkey absolutely dominated the UN's best tourism villages list, securing spots for 4 different rural hotspots that prioritize cultural preservation over mass influx.
Those destinations sound incredible, but let me pause and push back for a second. We need to provide a practical micro guide here. Not everyone listening has the time to take a luxury sleeper bus across Europe, or the budget to spend a month exploring the Skeleton Coast.
That is very true.
What are the immediate, actionable things an everyday traveler can do to hack the system and travel better on their very next trip? Let me throw one out and embrace the skip the clean rule.
Oh, I do this every time.
Choosing to hang the Do Not Disturb sign and not having your hotel towels and linens laundered daily saves thousands of gallons of water and massive amounts of energy over a week-long stay.
That is an excellent starting point. To build on that, before you even finalize a booking, use aggregator platforms that allow you to compare your flight routes by emissions output, not just by time or cost. Once you are actually in the destination, deliberately avoid all-inclusive resorts.
Because of the massive food waste those buffets generate.
The food waste is a primary factor. All-inclusive models consistently report the highest volumes of discarded food in the entire hospitality sector. But equally damaging is their financial structure. They inherently discourage travelers from leaving the compound.
Because you've already paid for everything.
Right, if you have already paid for all your meals at the resort, you are far less likely to eat at a local independent restaurant or hire an independent guide, which aggressively drives up the tourism leakage we discussed earlier.
That makes total sense.
Finally, the most impactful change you can make is embracing slow travel. The math is simple. Instead of taking 5 short, rushed weekend trips throughout the year, which requires 10 separate high-emission flights, consolidate your time into one deep, meaningful trip.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. It instantly slashes your transport emissions and provides the time necessary for genuine cultural immersion. This raises an important question. How do you want to relate to your destination? Are you arriving to extract a quick experience, or are you arriving to participate in a mutual exchange?
It's all about that mindset shift.
Right. The objective here is not to achieve absolute zero carbon perfection on every single trip. The objective is ensuring that the legacy of your visit, economically and environmentally, is a net positive for the people who live there.
Travel really is the ultimate exchange.
Yeah.
You receive incredible hospitality, and the standard expectation for 2026 is that you return care. We are officially witnessing the end of the oblivious checklist tourist.
We really are.
So what does this all mean? It means you hold incredible leverage. Every single euro you spend, every seemingly small choice you make, from packing a reusable water bottle to standing at a front desk and demanding a hotel's GSTC verification code before you book ripples outward.
It truly does make an impact.
You are the market demand. You have the financial power to force multinational corporations to change their operational behavior.
And that collective market power is yielding highly optimistic results. The World Travel and Tourism Council's recent data underscores that travel, when managed correctly, is actively driving positive change.
It's creating real momentum.
It is. It is creating high-quality, localized jobs. It is physically funding the conservation of endangered landscapes. And it is proving on a global scale that the sector can be resilient, deeply responsible, and economically viable all at once. The transition isn't just a theory. It is happening right now.
It is happening, and it is entirely driven by travelers deciding to pay attention. But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time talking about flying to Costa Rica or hiking in Madeira or protecting rhinos in Namibia.
Some amazing places.
Absolutely. But take a second and think about the place you currently call home. If you treated your own hometown like a destination you were visiting as an ecotourist, what local independent businesses would you suddenly discover?
That is a great perspective.
What natural, fragile spots in your own county would you suddenly realize are worth fighting to protect? Maybe the ultimate sustainable travel skill isn't just about the math of how we act when we cross the globe. Maybe it's learning to explore our own backyards with the exact same reverence, curiosity, and care that we pack in our suitcases. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.